Well, you know what? One of the best parts about this segment is that for an old man I don't have to worry they're going to take my job. It's like,
take your Social Security.
Right. Hey, you know what, Ed? You're not going to be able to do nothing anymore.
Ed, I need some stuff fixed around, mechanical stuff fixed around.
But
those are, I should say, because you were a politician. You published a newspaper.
Yeah.
You were a landowner.
Marketer.
You studied economics, marketer, and you could fix automobiles and motorcycles like nobody I've ever met.
If it's got pistons in it, I'm in.
So pretty, you Renaissance-y kind of thing. Some people who know you might be like crazy radical, right wing, which I never thought you actually were. But all right, let's talk about this perspective.
Yeah.
You don't have to worry because you're retired at this point.
Yeah.
All right,
but I still worry about this.
But you have children and grandchildren.
I do.
Every day I turn on the news, and at least somewhere throughout the day, if I watch the news on any channel, there's going to be a story about what is going to be the effect of AI on employment. So let me ask you this. Having studied this, looked at it, start with the big question. Do you think AI is coming for people's jobs, or has that just become media kind of hype?
Well, I think the first thing is it's not that AI is coming for their jobs. AI is going to eliminate their jobs because there's a difference. I don't think there's an intent, so to speak, that AI is going to do it. It's just that whatever it is that you may be doing, if AI is capable of doing it, it's going to become economically feasible for it to happen because in so many ways, whether it be speed, reference capabilities, even articulated speech, at this point, humans are definitely in competition. So what are going to be? And I go back, you and I obviously have had, involvement in terms of creating curriculums and things like that. Jobs with your hands, and eventually this is this type of dexterity ultimately maybe picked up by robots too, especially in mobile scenarios.
I think so. Humanoid. Why the big push now for humanoid robots so much?
So I mean, probably one of the few things that I could come up with would be plumbing.
Yeah, but if you got your robot that has hands, it can do it.
Well, that's true. So what are going to be those things? Well, there's certainly. And there is a list, and I think probably people. This may actually be the most useful discussion that we're going to have of all of these in terms of like tangible things to take away from two guys against AI. Don't you know? Anyway, but if you're in college or in high school and you're contemplating what you're going to do, and you are concerned in terms of like where you're going to get the resources to be able to raise a family and get a home and everything like that. First of all, and I had to laugh because the Amish have had this opinion. I went to a Dutch schoolhouse in Lancaster. This must have been like 25 years ago. And the lady goes and she says, we laugh at you people because while you're spending $100,000 and wasting 4 years of your life getting educated, we learn a trade. And we've already had our first child with no debt, and we're doing something because it's total. Everything's hands on. So those are the types of things. What are expressive things that you can do with your hands? And I'm not going to say that in an artistic sense because AI generated art is already creeping in.
Wow.
Music, AI. We had the one segment about the top notch. Songs,
country and R&B, they're running up the Billboard charts.
So all of a sudden, all these things that we've tied fast to human expression and artistic ability has been successfully programmed into AI to where it can take the inputs of that from a creative person initially, and then be able to repeat it, store it, modify it in ways faster and more completely than any human could ever match. That said. So where are we now? When we created the drone program, and that was one of the first things, one of my goals that I expressed to you was for us to be able to create the maintenance jobs to maintain the machines that are, in that case, was drones, but It's going to be the same thing to mechanically. Who's going to troubleshoot the AI when it's broken, because the AI is not going to be able to fix itself because it's down. So those are areas where obviously.
Well, let's talk about that for a second. So you got me into this, right?
I'm sorry.
And I thought initially, I said to myself, "Oh, these robots are interesting." Now, when we started, ChatGPT was still science fiction at that point. Someday there might,
Yeah.
but I remember what we got a hold of through. We were very lucky with some grants, and we got a hold of Boston Dynamics Spot, that yellow dog, the
Yes,
robot
yeah,
dog.
yeah.
And after about 3 days of playing with that, and I had an Amazon Alexa at my house. There's Google Home Assist. There's different ones. I couldn't help but think to myself, the Alexa exists, and you can talk to it, and it'll talk back to you. All right. It can only do certain things. It wasn't programmed with AI yet. Spot exists. I knew this work on artificial intelligence was coming along. I mean, it's been coming along since the 70s, if anybody thinks this is brand new. But I knew we were close. And I started telling students, look, we're probably, and I thought at the time 2040, now I probably think 2030. Look, here's where you're going to be. This machine, it's not going to take that long for somebody to take the Alexa, the Spot, and now the ChatGPT. All three technologies exist. It's not going to be that hard to integrate them into one entity. A thinking, talking robot. And we now have walking humanoids. At that point, Boston Dynamics humanoid was not. It still had flaws in it, but Spot had gotten really good.
Mm-hmm.
There's a number of humanoid robot companies out there now. That's a human being that can do every task.
But at the end of the day, it is
except critical thinking, which no humans want to do anymore.
Well, it's too much of a problem. But at the end of the day, as we're trying to talk in terms of what are potential occupations that people could go into that could compete with AI's capabilities. So at the time that we started with the drones, and they were just in their infancy at that time. The thing that came to mind for me was, well, there's propellers, there's motors, there are mechanical components here, many of which are miniaturized, that are going to break, and they're going to need to be serviced, and there's going to have to be a development of a service crew, if you wish, to maintain them. And I mean, probably a lot of it's more and more self-diagnosis is it's doing that.
Yeah, but if AI can write the code, it certainly in a robotic form can fix another robot.
Well, in a robotic form, yeah, that's probably true. And
I mean, if we got robots,
let's not make everybody depressed at everything.
But I mean, if we got robots now that can replace a human knee, I'm pretty sure it could probably turn a screw on a robot companion.
Well, that's true. I'll give you that one. I'll give you that. So, actually, throw this away because there's no jobs. We're all SOL.
Well, no. So let me ask: what's at risk right now? What do you think? What's the so?
Well, I mean, for instance, we're still talking, from a human standpoint, compassionate healthcare. I would say is something that, like a massage therapist or somebody like that, where you're talking that a human touch and human experience, assuming that humans still have value. That in the new world that we see, whether or not we decide that humans are just so expendable, you don't bother to fix them when they break. Similar to the way we've been with computers, they may be getting even with us. But I think that the areas where empathy and compassion, with a human sense, and the ability.
Yeah, but we did an episode where your minister can now be AI.
Well, that's true. That doesn't mean he was effective, though.
All right.
And in the same way, people are going to make economic choices. Do I particularly picture if I wanted to, have my shoulder massage, for instance? It's going to be pretty hard for me to figure out how that's going to work when the cold titanium goes against me and tries to make something happen. So with whatever form of crediting that we're going to have in the future, and I mean, we're going to probably get into depths of money and things like that, moving other episodes, but you're still going to have economic choices being made for the most part, and that those choices are going to allow for the preference of humans as opposed to robots to do specific things. So I use that case, nursing, for instance. When the caretaking of the elderly, can it be done? I mean, we've already found that chatbots are capable of providing companionship to the elderly. I mean, this has already happened, and certainly if they're bedridden and blind, then you'd never know the difference actually. But trying to think in terms of, well, what are jobs that are going to be preserved, and one of them is going to be the ability to assess a problem and respond to it, like a carpenter, for instance. There's rot in the corner of the house. Heretofore, I think a robot's going to be hard pressed. It may be able to do some infrared analysis and stuff like that and point you to the direction, but in terms of actually cutting it out, making the boards up, putting them in, I think for a while, carpenters still got a chance at earning a living. Certainly in terms of like unique custom craftsmanship, the ability to do that kind of stuff like welding and things like that. Once it's mass produced, yes, it can be easily done by a robot. But as far as like the initial one, and we've talked about the fact that AI is regurgitation for the most part. If a human comes up with a plan, it can be reproduced real easy. I don't know. I know you've been experimenting a little bit with the 3D printers. Do you have to provide it? You have to provide it a template for it to do something. It doesn't. You don't say, "Hey, I want you to make me a T-square."
Yeah, it's not embedded with AI yet. It still takes design, but we know that the AI is going to be able to do design.
That's true, but is
based on verbal?
If
it can do all the art, if it can create a movie star, if it can create singers, it's going to be able to do CAD design for sure.
But somebody's going to have to tell it to do it. Is it going to decide it by itself? Is it going to wake up in the morning and say, we know we need to have a redesign of part number 263?
But how many of those jobs would there be?
Well, I don't know. But I think at this point, and this is the AI or Two Guys Against AI defense chapter, as the endangered humans attempt to try and some way to be best postured moving forward. And I think that's one of the other things that, when we've looked at it, it's like, okay, we are going to be in competition with another entity. I mean, certainly the infrastructure to provide the power at this point, AI is totally reliant upon humans. That they're as far as like maintaining the grid, putting it in.
Does that last a generation or half a generation or 3 generations?
I don't know. The way I've been watching AI develop, it could be next Tuesday. But at this point, I think we, at the risk of just throwing our hands up and saying we might just as well all just go out and turn into Soylent Green. What are things that we can do in the transition, and then buy us the time to be able to reevaluate as to what's going to be the most appropriate action to go forward.
But that's not going to be for everyone.
Well, it's not going to be for everyone, and nor is it going to be forever. And I mean, quite candidly, this is not the first time. You figure, my dad always got me with and at the time that the quartz watches came out, and he said, suddenly, the Swiss watchmaker who was able to craft a miniaturized 21 jewel watch was immediately eliminated with a quartz crystal in a heartbeat, and made in such a way that it was more accurate than the most sophisticated mechanical watch could be. This is nothing new, and I think at the same time that we've sometimes maybe painted a pessimistic picture, humans are pretty resilient in terms of redefining ourselves. When the horses stopped and everybody figured that was going to end, automobiles came, internal combustion was going to be the only answer. Next thing you know, we had electric cars.
So the advancement goes on and on and on. I agree with that. All right. We've talked a little bit on previous videos. When these economic structures shift, there's a lot of pain and suffering that goes on.
And opportunity.
And I agree with the CEO in the video when he says this will be the generation of more millionaires than any technological innovation before. But with those winners, there's going to be a hell of a lot more losers this time. Because it's not just the watchmakers. It's throughout. Both blue-collar and white-collar jobs.
Well,
retail, and computer programming jobs.
There is going to be a career shift.
Well, there's going to be lots of them at once.
Yeah.
So there's a prediction of mass unemployment. Are we ready for that?
Never will be.
Well, how? Let's say our goal here is to keep American society prospering and moving forward and intact, right? How do you do that with that level of mass unemployment, with a national debt as high as we have it, without an infrastructure really, or even, one vague idea. And I know he didn't originate it, but technically, or attributed anymore to the first guy who had the guts to say it out loud, really, in a public sphere, Andrew Yang. Is there any better idea than UBI? And do we even have the money to UBI right now if we needed it?
Well, and do we know it, first of all? I mean, do we even know what jobs are going to be created? And you're right, there's going to be a difficult time. I mean, my personal approach to this is, as I've been preparing for this for years, in terms of how I figure I can, weather the storm, because there's going to be a storm. You talked about the fact that, was one of the CEOs, has got their house full with food, and I mean, I doubt if it's without some degree of anticipation that the Obamas have a wall around their house, and the inside track, people can connect the dots and say this is going to get messy. That said, we're also, I think what we need to consider is that what are going to be the new opportunities that come as a result of this. Because, for instance, let's go. I'm going to go back to probably the 70s, and I was talking to my wife about this, and you've got Pac-Man came out, and then it was Mario, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, there was the creation of a gaming industry that now is great sophistication and tremendous amount is AI.
All right, but again, there were only so many pinball whizzes.
No, but what it was
really put out of work.
But what it was, I think the shift is going to change to entertainment in ways that we don't even yet understand. Because at the end of the day,
there's definitely going to be a lot in virtual reality.
Right. So you're looking at, all right, so people are going to be home, and once they go through the mental change necessary to accept the fact, I mean, you could take a factory worker who got laid off, replaced by technology, who spent the rest of their life sitting there staring at the door waiting for them to call them back. It didn't happen, never did happen. Or there's the people who got out of that job and then they made a new career and they found out what it is. I'm not going to be a fortune teller and say that I know exactly what's going to be the opportunity in the future, but there's going to be a change in the demographic and there's going to be a change in terms of the market demands, which is going to create new opportunities.
But when that mass unemployment is there,
yes,
and everybody's trying to get retrained in the same industries,
yes,
there will be losers of that.
Absolutely.
All right, we don't generally like to have losers anymore in our society.
Well, even losers hate even more to have losers.
Well, but I mean, we don't generally like that, right? I mean, we've never been able to deal with homelessness, but we talk about it constantly. Mm-hmm. We've never been able to deal with some of these structural problems based on race, gender, but we talk about it. We care about it. What do we do when everybody finds themselves unemployed? And we're talking 20, 30% of the population.
So I'm going to go back to
how do we sustain that?
I'm going to go back to one of our earlier episodes, and I think that this is when you start to look at how things start to play together again. People to a tremendous degree choose whether or not they are or aren't going to have a family, and I mean there's some ways that I can accept the way that they do that, and there's other ways that I can't. But what's happened is we start to look at the interrelationships, especially with our young and the introverted status that they're in. We're finding that the reproductive elements are not necessarily going to be going on, and we may see a natural, significant drop in population, partially because of just lack of propagation.
Well, we're seeing it now.
Right.
Between climate change, I don't think there's going to be a future on the planet, which has gotten embedded in most people's minds. Right. Between there aren't going to be jobs in the future. I don't want to bring a kid into this world. You're seeing that globally, like wildly globally, people are doing it.
And I mean, that part of that's been
Malthus will be very happy right now.
Well, I mean, what it's done is whether it be through education or whatever the case may be, to make people think that way. That's part of it. Any other part of it is as we become more introverted, and our interests go in other places, and people become more narcissistic, basically, because they're not going to have a relationship. They're not going to bother. They're not going to bother to deal with all the drama involved because they're going to be able to be amused virtually. So to a degree, one of the transitional things that I see happening is going to be a decrease in population, and unfortunately, being a realist, I think a lot of people are going to starve to death. Which, whether it be malnutrition leads to disease or whatever the case may be, we're going to see a purging to a degree because there's just not going to be a way for everybody to be supported, unless we're actually able to employ AI well enough to maintain production enough for us to be through the transitional phase. Because then ultimately what it's going to have to be, it's almost going to have to be somewhat of a directive, is that we just have to decrease population because we have to. Because there isn't going to be anything for people to do. Okay. The desire to live is going to go away. You're not going to even want to be. Who's going to want to bring their children into a feudal society?
Well, not only that, who's going? Look, we've both spent a lot of time in a rural area. Mm-hmm. Farming is food production of any kind is extraordinarily difficult.
And not reliable.
It hasn't been well supported for a long time either. Why would anyone continue doing that hard work to feed a bunch of people sitting at home if there was no benefit for them?
Well, and that's part of what we touched upon. One of the inherent failures in socialism is that there's no personal benefit for exertion made above the norm. But I mean,
these people are already working. And look, I've known enough farmers to know it's a struggle. The ones who do it successfully can do it well.
Yep.
But it's never going to make the amount of return on investment a lot of other easier careers had. I'm using had for everything now.
And I think that the other thing too is that the subsistence sciences, which our forefathers used, may reassert themselves as people decide more and more to withdraw from the electrical quagmire, if you wish. It's a lot of the Amish, pretty much have demonstrated that that's their intent.
Well, the other thing I tell young people right now, Ed, is aside from figure out how to be the human in the loop and partner with AI, because that's going to be your best chance of success. Yep. Yeah, read a few things on homesteading and get ready.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of
which will be fine for us in the rural areas, but what's going to happen to people in the urban areas where they can't homestead?
Well, interestingly enough, and as I drive through Florida, coming north here, the level of cluster development really far exceeds any conceivable demand that I can picture, other than the fact that we're already in the process of creating cluster housing to be able to address this. And they're not far, they're far from concentration camps. They're nice, but it's an entirely different living model. So where you're talking everything is inside of the community. You don't have to drive anywhere. It's a redefinition. Certainly for me, having grown up in a rural environment, it's very foreign to me. But for city dwellers, it actually ends up where, it could conceivably be a good alternative to where, the housing could be provided. I think the wild card, and this is going to be one of the other areas where I look at, where are opportunities. It's going to be minerals, oil production, energy production, maintenance of the grid. Those types of things.
So outer space, as we run out of those things on this planet.
Very possible. And as we look at this, and where we had touched on this before too, is the competition for resources with AI as well. Takes a massive amount of energy. Certainly in terms of, and I don't recall.
All right, so let me stop you here. To whose benefit ultimately is all this then? Who's benefiting from all this?
Well,
If all these people are going to find themselves out of work,
right.
and invariably, the pain and suffering we're talking about there won't be you can't get designer clothes. It's going to be a struggle for food, water. Think back to the COVID supply chain issues.
Well, you're Maslow's hierarchy, and you're down to your core.
You're going to shoot right down to the bottom.
Yeah, you're to the bottom. Yeah, and that is a.
Unless, I mean, I know everybody wants to say this up as great as talking about self-actualization.
Yeah.
And maybe you get there someday, but not before a decade, at least a decade.
I've been trying, but I've
really hard living.
I'm running out of time. But, I think that if we recognize that's going to happen, is first of all trying to prepare yourself. And I had gone through a prep phase in my life, and I started to think, oh well, I'll go long term. If you try to do something long term, if you've got something, people are going to find out they're going to just take it anyway. So we're looking at there's going to.
Well, that's where the fear of the violence.
Right.
And
exactly.
let me say outright, one of our biggest fears of this is the possibility of a perpetuation of mass violence. I think that is probably what I fear the most, and I think anybody aging should fear that. Because I think in a winner take all violence situation, those of us who have aged, it's not looking good for us.
No, and I think to be fair too, if I look back into history, based on average life expectancy, if I look back in the 1800s, I should have been dead 30 years ago. So I've had a pretty good run, and
but I don't think that's the way most people.
No, I get it, and
they may joke but they don't think it.
But. It still could end up being an existence that far surpasses what was even 100 years ago. And I, having had experiences, flying, and I've done things that kings of 100 years ago couldn't have done. Yet I'm far from the top of the food chain, but that the opportunities were there. Technologically, as well as, being able to have, I haven't had to do food subsistence. I've tried gardening, but I'd be a lot thinner if I had to rely on it. But that said, it's we're looking at a whole different dynamic there in terms of where we're going to be, what our goals are and everything. But it's still, if you look at cluster housing, let's say that they do work out the ability through, and I mean, aquaculture, for instance, is one of the things that, I had studied while I was, we were talking about that in the county at the time. And there were actually some people who were working on it. It has tremendous possibilities. We farm salmon, for instance, now, where heretofore, the only way you get salmon, you have to hang out at the end of the river, with the few times that it would be there. Now we've generated a routine supply of protein that is, genetically engineered to even provide.
Right, so let me take this. So we can do that in the United States.
Yeah.
And between the two oceans, we have an amazing set of natural resources here.
Correct.
If anybody thinks Russia invaded Ukraine over Russians, they invaded it for the breadbasket because they know what's coming. Mm-hmm. And you got China. They're a little bit less so that's why you see the expansion there. But they're rich in that. But a lot of countries aren't.
Well, that's nothing.
Food becomes the new gas and oil of the future.
Starvation in Ethiopia has been going on since I was a child.
Yeah, but I think this time, and remember, we've mass-produced food around the planet. I mean, you see this in we've used way too many preservatives and such. I think we're realizing now that
that's the only reason I've lasted this long.
We've mass-processed everything to the point where I'm not even sure the nutritional value. So we've learned to kind of live off that. Mm-hmm. But I don't know that we can do that for the entire planet.
That's a difficult question, and it would require only. And let's look at AI.
But won't that lead to wars then? Because
if we don't do it fast enough, and I think that's the thing is that as we look at AI, and again, as I question sometimes the suitability of us being two guys against AI. I think AI provides tremendous opportunity in terms of what it's going to be able to do to, or could actually improve um, the standard of living across the world
Long term.
long term.
Short term,
The-
there's going to
the-
be those gap time period.
The transition is going to be difficult. The fact of the matter is that, and I just use aquaculture because I found that to be one of the most amazing things. And we see
But why
huge buildings
Why do it?
because
Why
we
are
want to
we
eat.
doing this?
Because we want to eat.
No, I understand that part. No, what I mean is why without the transition plan and being transition ready are we pushing this stuff so fast? That's what I'm against.
I can tell you,
I'm against the stupidity of it.
well, the thing is that you've got numerous players with significant investment that are in a competition as to who's going to have the winner. That's why it's happening fast. If we were to be looking at it from a standpoint of a governmental model going about this in an organized fashion, it wouldn't be happening like this. But right now, you're looking at individual corporations who are in a rush to see who's going to be the winner, releasing things that are perhaps not necessarily ready, and at the same time, not necessarily beneficial for us as a society or the world, because that's not their focus. Their focus is being first. So we're kind of going into this headlong a little fast. And at the same time, internationally, you've got Chinese interests, you've got Russian interests, you've got
I agree.
It's not just the corporations.
Hard to stop it.
It's the competition is there mostly because the carrot is so big. People are looking at this and it's like they've got the opportunity to get a leg up. The competition is out there. There is going to be a redefinition moving forward. It's inescapable, and what that's going to look like and who's going to be the major player is who wins the AI race that's going on right now.
How do you tell a 40-year-old man or woman who did everything they were supposed to do, fulfilled every promise, has teenage, college-age kids at 40, maybe even grade school kids, because people start later now than maybe you and I started. How do you tell them, you don't have a job, you can't feed your family. We really can't help you feed your family yet, but this is important for progress.
Well, we talked about Dr. Zhivago. I think that was a good example. The transitional phase between the Tsar's government and the subsequent socialist/communist regime that took place. There was terrible time through the transition, and this has not been uncommon. In that case, it was a form of governmental change that came about. Sometimes it's not successful. I mean, Cuba's still struggling. Russia was probably more able to move along. China has probably moved better since 1949 than most.
We only know success here. Most of us alive.
Most people here don't understand adversarial.
Very
scenarios.
few, probably young people, had the privilege that I had to be raised by their grandparents who were older grandparents. So I literally was raised by two people who experienced the Depression. I've been waiting for the Depression my whole and mentally preparing, intellectually preparing, prepping every other way possible to where people think I'm a wacko, including the people who live in my home. But man, those stories of the Depression were my childhood stories. Out of a weird coincidence, it has perpetuated me throughout my life to prepare for this moment coming.
And
I don't think most people did that.
Let me put this in another phase. And I'm obviously my parents were from the Depression, and my mother was on a farm, and they had a cow, and I guess a couple goats, and it was subsistence farming that they had. My grandfather did have some kind of a job going on, but at the end of the day, my mother was left in devilly marked for the rest of her life that she was never going to be hungry again, and certainly her children weren't going to be. When she passed, and I knew we used to joke, we call her the squirrel. She had food in the freezer from 30 years before.
Absolutely.
it was a case not so much of whether or not you kept it fresh, it was whether or not you were going to have something to eat. Now, obviously, the thing that she didn't take into consideration, which became a challenge for me frequently, was you need electricity to run the freezer. And, it would thaw. But ultimately, after she passed, and I went down into the cellar, and there was a block of ice that was approximately 8 feet across and 3 feet wide. And I managed to chisel it out. And, she had dated everything. And I'm looking at this, and it's like, well, what type of adversity would lead a person to go that far? And then, ultimately you start to look in terms of like, well, how long it can last. So, I mean, the first thing is that the dynamic is if you're not in of a mindset that you're going to be able to adapt, preparations can only last you through a transition until you can adapt.
Correct.
You're not going to be able to put enough aside to survive, so to say. So, I'm going to hope that without us enslaving people in the process, which is the other possibility, because exploitation becomes, exponentially more possible when people are in desperate need, that there is also people who are actually looking out there and saying, okay, well, we need to increase food production. We need to make changes mentally. The people in the United States, at least where we are, certainly need to,
It's been a pretty good run
been
here.
a good run, and they haven't had to deal with adversity.
I suspect the Yanomamo down there in South America in the Amazon will be just fine.
Yeah, I mean they've never tasted.
I suspect the Amish will find a way to survive.
Oh no, they're going to do fine. I mean, their biggest challenge is going to be is that when everybody figures out that they've got stuff, that they're going to take it from. And I mean that's the anarchy component to this, which ultimately is going to lead to some form of military dictatorship. It's inevitable, at least through the transition. The anarchy is going to be out of control. And who's going to pay the army is the next question. And what's the agenda moving forward? What that's going to look like. But
so again, I go back to why we don't have to do this right now.
Well, but I'm going to come back and say to you, all right, if we don't do anything, I think a lot of this is going to happen naturally. I mean, for instance, if we extrapolate that fiat currency is going to self-destruct in 2030, which is just a hypothesis from Keynes in 1930, what would happen? What's going to happen? How fast is it going to happen if the banking system fails? You can't buy gas because it's all computer controlled. It's all done through the central banking system. You can't buy food because the whole distribution system isn't going to happen, and there's going to be no means to finance it. So if you look at it from a standpoint of that there's an impending financial collapse that's going to happen irrelevant of whether or not there is or isn't AI, you could almost say, at least we're trying to do something about it to come up with an alternative. Is it necessarily the best outcome? I don't know if there is a good outcome going forward, and I'm sorry I sound like such a pessimist.
They're going to come back to the same question. We don't have to do this.
Well,
tomorrow we could do it on 10 years from now.
Well, it's possible.
We could build the structures.
But what happens if the financial charade ends before we're ready? So, and I think we've already said I don't think that the design was that it was supposed to happen this fast. It's competition that has done it, and it's not a capitalist model of competition because it's happening with governments. We're talking, the Chinese are fighting just as hard to be on top of the AI, paradigm as we are. And that's two entirely different economic plans.
Well, let me throw another idea out.
All right,
let me move to another. So my grandmother would talk about during the Depression, they had some bad years, right? Where my grandfather went to the CC camps. Those were camps they sent Depression era babies to.
Civilian Conservation Corps.
Yep. Comes back. They're doing okay because of the skills he learned in the CC camps.
Yep.
He can find work.
Yep.
They have a little bit more than the neighbors, which, by the way, was still poverty, but it was enough to feed.
Yep.
To the day my grandmother died, she made extra pie because she would stick them on the windowsill knowing they would be taken. They would be stolen. But it wasn't real stealing because they knew it was the neighbors. And nobody wanted to take charity because people were proud of them. So they did that.
That she was a good-hearted person.
Well, she was raised on, I am my brother's keeper. That's gone.
Well,
it's gone.
You want to start
Now it is, I am my brother's judger.
Well, certainly the shunning has moved to the next step. But in the interest of going way off scale here, there was a list, as I recall, of what are good jobs to look at here in 2025 moving forward.
Yeah, let me say this is an article by multiple people called "Working with AI: Measuring the Applicability of Generative AI Occupations," and done by Microsoft. And there are a list of jobs or a list of skills that one can come up with in here. And it's basically, look at assistance. So purchasing goods and services is an assist. Execute financial assist. Perform athletic activities.
Right.
So I guess the professional athletes will be fine, but that's very few of us.
Well, that may be the entertainment is going to be just that part of it and personal development.
Doing research, preparing food, these kinds of things will have humans in the loop. All right. But training others, no. So I guess all of us in the education field.
You're done.
Yeah, probably. Distribution, no. Coaching, probably not. That's going to be AI.
I'm not sure on that one, but because I think that there is still a human component there in terms of, and I know you're showing me that it says there, but it's I think
these are probably academics writing it, so they're nervous about their own.
There are going to be where the humans are still going to be a market, and they're going to be making choices. And I mean, I do it now. I don't use the kiosk when I go into McDonald's. I go up to the counter because that ensures the job for the person behind the counter. They may see it as a nuisance that I'm bothering them, but it's ensuring their job.
Well, here, you could be a roofer.
That's right.
I'm going to the highest jobs.
Okay.
All right, roofing. I still say the humanoid robots are probably going to be able to do that. Maid and house cleaning. I'm going to tell you, that's wrong because Samsung already has a robot to do the dishes and clean your house. Paving.
Yeah.
But if nobody has a job, we don't really need all these roads because you ain't going to be able to go anywhere. Motorboat operations.
No.
That's it. Orderly. So, working with people who need help with going to the bathroom.
That's right. Right.
Floor sanding.
No, I don't know. That could be a machine to do that.
Pile driver operations.
For now, yeah.
Rail laying for railroads. Foundry, mold, and core makers. Water treatment plant system operators.
System operators ties fast to the utilitarian country.
Dredge operators.
Yeah.
All right. But also, floor sanders. There's 5,000 jobs.
Yeah.
So you can't take everybody from interpreting by the way, if you're an interpreter or translator, that's the worst.
No, it's done. Yeah.
If you're a historian, that's second worst according to this.
I got one of them in my phone. Yeah.
Passenger attendants. I just got to replace the flight attendants, I guess. Sales reps, they're done. Writers and authors, they're done. All right. Even CNC tool programmers. I found that one fascinating. That can be.
But not designers.
No.
Not designers, because we still have, through all this, if there's any ray here of hope, is that the initiative and the initial designing capabilities still seem to require that human spark.
Travel agents done.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Concierge, telemarketing, political scientists, the news people are gone. This one was fascinating to me. Mathematicians, covered by 0.91%. 91% can be done by AI.
I believe that.
So that leaves the people who are inventing new formulas.
Yeah, that's true. As far as the bean counters, the machines can do that.
I mean, there aren't enough of the jobs that AI can't do to fulfill the need
Correct.
of all the humans.
Correct.
For work.
Correct. And how quick the actual transition takes place remains to be seen because it's going to take time. There's still logistical issues that have to happen. I mean, we don't even need the delivery truck driver soon because we're going to have a drone come and make the delivery.
Well, again, but here's the good news: snow is a factor.
That's true.
Snow's going to help.
Well, weather period, because reactive to weather scenarios is still going to fall greatly upon humans. So all is not lost, but I think that and I certainly would encourage our watchers and listeners to take a look at what these potentials are. And there's numerous articles out there, so like they can kind of think in terms of as you making a career choice. What's one that makes sense that provides a future that could work for you, and then don't use Cliff's notes. Actually learn whatever the trade is and get good at it.
That's going to help you a great deal.
I think so.
I think you're going to need, you know what you're going to need? You're going to need to learn how to human agency again. You're going to need to learn to take care of yourself.
Well, there you go.
That right? Sounds as like much as you're going to be promised by the statists that they're going to do it.
That's true.
At the end of the day, it's going to come back to the preamble of the Constitution. And
personal responsibility.
Well, as Prince said, in the song, Let's Go Crazy, you're on your own.
Till the next time.
See you then.